super amped today. I just went by the post office on the way to the studio and I know what this is. I want to share it with you guys. You know, why make pull tabs if they're not actually going to pull? So this print is a Richard Avedon. This is Joe Louis, who was a boxer in the 1940s. This is a portrait of his fist. Next thing I gotta do is get a frame for this, but this is so awesome. Just so you'll know, I'm a huge fan of anything Richard Avedon. But anyway, this is really cool and I need to get a frame for it now. But this brings me to the topic that I want to discuss with you guys today. So having a conversation about looking at photographs and when we study what is it that we're looking for. Interesting story, I worked at an art museum for a long time. In fact, the first 7 years of doing this show, I was working at an art museum. I had a day job. One of the things that we did in there when we were setting up and planning exhibitions is we would always consider statistics on how long people would look at art on the walls. Just guess for a second, how long do you think the average person spends looking at a painting in a museum? So they have traveled to a museum, they probably paid some sort of admission fee, they've taken time out of their day, they're in there, there's an interest in the work, you're sitting there looking at something on the wall. What do you think? Just guess. Keep it in your mind here. Well, you can say it out loud. I can't hear you, nor can anybody else. But anyway, just think for a second. Wait, a minute maybe? 2 minutes? 10 minutes? Just one piece of art. How long do you think people spend looking at that? Any guesses? I'm waiting. 3 seconds. That number used to surprise me in a lot of ways because I have a music background, and it's interesting because when you compare the two, there's an element with both video and music, which is time. You don't have time in a still photograph. A still photograph captures a moment in time. But come on, 3 seconds? Especially if it's something you enjoy, it's something that's your passion. I put together a small list of what I think about. I brought it down to about 4 points, and so we'll kind of go through these. So first off, what does a photograph say? So I talk about this concept called visual communication. I've been harping on this for the last 12 to 13 years or so, since 2008. Visual communication is the essence of what it is that we're doing. Now, when you think of communicating visually versus communicating verbally like I am now, well, I can say something like, don't forget the cat food on the way home from work, right? That's something to communicate. Would you say that in a photograph? Well, I argue you probably could, but what's being communicated visually in that sort of formal viewer to artist relationship is a little bit different. So this could be literal. So for instance, let's take a famous photograph like Alfred Eisenstadt's famous VJ Day kiss. And so this was an image, it's of the sailors returning in 1945 from World War II. This was taken in Times Square. This sailor grabs a random girl, and I think the story is that she was a dental assistant, and has a kiss with her in Times Square. This is an iconic image, and it has something very powerful, very strong that's communicating. So this is more of a literal communication. I think this could also be less literal too. So I'll give you another example, so something that's not quite as literal. I told this story before, but if you haven't heard it, when I was a kid, one of the first photographs that I ever remember seeing that inspired me to actually do what I'm doing today, I was just so engrossed in this photograph. One of my dad's best friends was a very successful commercial photographer. He was based in Dallas, where I grew up, and we were very close with their family. They'd come over to our house for dinner. Occasionally, we'd go over to their house, and when we'd go over to their house, they had all these black and white prints on the wall. I knew that Greg had studied and apprenticed with this guy named Arnold Newman, but I didn't know who Arnold Newman was, but I just knew that these black and white photographs were just really interesting to me. And there was one in particular, every time we'd go over there, I just couldn't quit looking at this. I'd find excuses to go to the bathroom and go through this room that it was in just to go see it again. I thought this was so cool. And it was the famous portrait of Igor Stravinsky sitting at the piano. It's a very modernist composition. Of course, Arnold Newman was known for doing environmental portraits. So I had no idea who Igor Stravinsky was. I didn't know who Arnold Newman was. So I was left with just communicating with this photograph, or letting the photograph communicate to me. You could tell by the somewhat obstructed but still obvious that this is a piano lid in the background. Sometimes this is called the B flat because it also looks like the flat symbol in music, or a lowercase b. But anyway, either way, you could tell that this guy is sitting at the piano. He's either a pianist or he's a composer. There's something to do with music here. And that was interesting because I think even early on with that first photograph that I became interested in, that still strikes me today, it's still one of my favorites, that all of a sudden this has the power of communicating something. And it's very obscure in a certain way because it's not telling you in words what it is that's communicating. It's using visual symmetry, it's using iconography, it's using suggestion. You don't see the whole piano in this image, it's cropped out. But you're given just enough information where it starts telling you what it is, and I think that's where a little bit of that viewer-photographer dialogue starts to come out. Which brings me to the second idea of what we're looking for in a photograph, which is composition. Composition is always important. Now, I know that we live in a world today that's definitely post-1960s, and in the 1960s, that seems like the time when anything went. The idea of abstraction came up, the idea of just being strange for the sake of being strange. Anything was really accepted during the time frame of, I'd say, probably the mid-50s up through the 70s or so. And so before that, you had art movements that were more formalized, that, like, when you look at famous painters during the Baroque period, or you look, there's various periods that would last hundreds of years where everybody's work essentially had the same aesthetic compositional value to it. I mean, things didn't change as quickly. We live in a world today where things change even more quickly. But composition is always important no matter what it is that you're doing. If you look at abstract paintings from the 1950s, if you look at things like Jackson Pollock, Jasper Johns, there is composition there. Pollock and those drip paintings. And what is that doing? What is being communicated through that? What is the relationship of those objects that are on the canvas? That's what's important. Nothing is ever random. Everything must be intentional to some degree. And this is what makes more improvisational types of photography, so things like street photography, candid shots, snapshots, this is what makes the best of those so good, is because nothing was really planned necessarily. I mean, photography is you're capturing what it is in the moment. Sometimes it's deliberate, sometimes it's intentional. I think Henri Cartier-Bresson, and one of the reasons that I just think he's one of the greatest, is he had an unbelievable eye and an unbelievable perception of what was about to happen before the camera in the scene. And I think he was patient enough to wait, look for things, and he just operated on this incredible level of quality all the time. I mean, one of the most consistent photographers ever to grace this planet. Everything he shot seemingly was really incredible. He had kind of a thing worked out. He had classical training as a painter. He talks about all this in the intro to The Decisive Moment, which is his most famous book, probably one of the most famous photography books ever. Anyway, it's interesting because I think that when you get into that improvisational aspect, that's going to judge the success largely of a photo in the end or not. Now, nothing ever has to be perfect, and I think that goes for any of these things. That's why I'm dividing this into 4 categories, right? And so you may be saying something strong, there may be a strong aesthetic to it, and the composition could be a little off, or maybe one of the other points is weak in the composition. But these are the things that you look for, if that makes any sense. Thirdly, we get into the visual aesthetic of things. So what is the style of photograph? What does it look like? What is that communicating? And I think that's important too. I think one of the biggest drivers in photography is the concept of nostalgia. There's a lot of photographers that become famous that were at the peak of their career in the 1950s, 1960s, and part of the appeal to those photographs, especially when you look at the vintage photograph market, is that there is that nostalgia. It's a place in time that is not of the current day, and that is a really strong thing. But the hard part about that is that if you go recreate nostalgia, then you're just recreating it, and you're not going to be nostalgic now. You won't know until 50, 100 years from now whether your work has that quality or not. Maybe you don't have to wait that long, but if you just look at somebody like Joel Meyerowitz, I think a lot of his early work in New York really embodies nostalgia. New York is a place that has changed a lot since the 1960s, 1970s. He had a lot of street photography that really brought that time through, and you feel that in those photographs. People aren't wearing the same clothes we wear today. The hairstyles are different, and it has a really charming nostalgia to it. Another thing we could look at is a more modern aesthetic. If you look at somebody like Michael Kenna, who does beautiful work, but there's this wonderful minimalist quality, there probably are some hints of modernism in his work. It's always black and white, the simplicity of it, the ability to cull out information that you don't need in a photograph, especially a landscape, I think is a really interesting skill to have, and it's really powerful because we're not overwhelmed by too much in the photograph. It's nailed down to a specific composition, but as well good as his composition is, I think it's important to mention his aesthetic, because it's black and white, it's always high contrast, and has this wonderful minimal quality to it, and it's amazing work. I think it's challenging to make these videos in the context of YouTube because you're dealing with a very finite attention span that people might have for the video, so I feel like I'm really oversimplifying a lot of this, but you guys get the gist, and maybe this is something that we can revisit from time to time. But I want to go on to my fourth point here, which is what moves you. I think that the idea of what moves you, in addition to when we look at aesthetics, these are going to be things that are just going to be very opinion based. And so in other words, what you think is moving in a photograph, I might not be moved at all, and vice versa. There's nothing wrong with that. That's okay. That's what gives us variety. That's what makes life beautiful. That's what gives us choices. That's what makes us all different. It makes us diverse as a group of people living in the world experiencing art or photography. So nothing wrong with that, but it is interesting to look at, particularly this whole idea of what moves you in a photograph. Certain photographs kind of have the power to become iconic, and it is really rare. In fact, when you look at works of art in general, whether it's a painting, a sculpture, look at the vast number of things that are made or created, and then things that become iconic. In other words, the household name. For instance, the Mona Lisa. Everyone knows the Mona Lisa. Whether you know Leonardo da Vinci's work or not, you probably know that he painted it, and you probably know that painting. It's a very famous painting. Is it the greatest painting in the world? That's up for debate. I'm not very moved by it. I think there's better Da Vinci paintings, but a lot of people are moved by it, and that's something that's out of my control. It's kind of out of my grasp. It doesn't matter what I think at that point. Mona Lisa is a great example of that. When I did my interview with Graciela Iturbide, who is an incredible photographer in Mexico, and she has an image that sort of went viral, so to speak. It became an icon, or as she put it very poetically, it had wings of its own. And it's an image that she took of the woman with the iguanas on her head. It's a great picture. It's one of my favorites of hers. And she said, I had nothing to do with it, but next thing I know, it's on this mural in Los Angeles. People are lifting it and they're putting it on tequila bottles. All of a sudden it's on street signage in Mexico. And she was like, why? And that was not the intention of that photograph. It just kind of took on this life of its own. And what's fascinating about that is that nobody has control over that. I think another case of this would be Afghan Girl, the Steve McCurry shot. That's an image that I've seen reproduced on murals. I've seen it everywhere. It becomes very iconic for a group of people. It doesn't matter what led up to that photograph. It doesn't matter the circumstances that happened around that photograph or how it was taken. It's the image in the end. And when something comes iconic like that, it's fascinating because very few photographs actually have that status. I think another one would actually be the first image I mentioned, which is the Eisenstadt VJ Day Kiss. So that's something that's interesting too. Now, is every image going to be iconic to everybody? No, but there may be things that just speak to you, and that's what you've got to figure out is what is it that is speaking to you? Because it might be different than what it would say to me, but you've got to understand what that communication is. All right, so we need to talk about how to put this into practice. This needs to be something that you do on a regular basis, which is looking at photographs. And I want to get into this, but real quick, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor today, who are the awesome folks over at Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people like you. It is a place to explore new skills. You can deepen existing passions and basically just get lost in creativity. Are you holed up at home? Spontaneous acts of creativity may help break up the routine of a day spent indoors. Explore some workshops and classes to help you get out of that rut. So one class that I've been looking at a lot this week is Street Photography: Unlock the Secrets of Composition, Color, and Confidence. This one is taught by Craig Whitehead, who you guys might actually know. I've featured him on this show a number of times. He goes under the moniker 6 Street Under on various social platforms. This class is excellent, as I would expect no less from Craig. He's a fabulous photographer with a really good understanding of the history of what's come before him, but he adds his own personal spin on the top. He is an excellent photographer. This class is going to teach you things like having confidence, preparing to shoot, being able to pre-visualizing the scene, capturing fleeting moments, playing with abstraction, making selects, editing, and everything. And so I really recommend this. Craig is an awesome guy. You may be able to check out this class absolutely free, and here's how. So the first 1,000 people to use the link below in this video will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership. Skillshare is curated specifically for learning. So this means there's no ads and that they're always launching new premium classes so that you can stay focused and follow wherever creativity takes you. So use the link below, check them out, and learned something new today, and I want to give a special shout out and thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this episode of The Art of Photography. One thing that's been on my mind for the last week or so is, well, when you look at the last year and what we've all been through, and I'm not going to go into that, everybody has had that burden on their shoulders. We've all been uncertain. There's been fear involved. It's been a huge change. We're social beings and we don't see people. And for me as a photographer, this is something that has affected the work that I produce in a major way. I knew it would. You know, all of a sudden when you can't see people, things are less convenient to do. You're not able to travel. You're not able to photograph and do the same things or the things that you want to. It's one thing to have an idea or an ambition, or, you know, I've looked at a lot of street photography in the last month and what I would give to go to New York City right now. It would be amazing, but it's just not possible. I haven't had a vaccination. It's just traveling is still kind of a thing. But anyway, my whole point is that we are starting to enter a phase, and you're starting to see this in the news. You're hearing people talk about it because we do have vaccines now, where hopefully some point this year we could get out of this and we could start returning back to what resembles normal, even though I don't think it's gonna be like turning on a light switch. But this has got me thinking a lot. And you guys probably remember, if you follow my channel for a while, early on a year ago, I was doing a lot of stuff with photo assignments, and it was things that you can do around your house. And essentially those were all rooted in the idea of being able to practice photography, because you don't want to have your skills dulled necessarily. And the truth is that there are things that we have in our everyday lives that may be in your house, it may be in your kitchen, it may be in your office, your bedroom, whatever, that you see all the time. Your own front yard, your own backyard. But the interesting thing is, like, even take the example of the front yard. You can go out in your front yard, and if you spend an hour out there and really think about it, I bet you could start doing macro maybe, or maybe there's something in your yard that's of interest. My yard has no interest. It's flat, so macro probably is the... But anyway, my point is sit out there for an hour and think about it. You got to force yourself into starting to act creative again. And the reason I'm saying this is because hopefully if we're starting to get to the point where we get out of this, this is the time, and I've said this before, this is the time for the shed. This is the time to think about those things. Because if you're really serious about photography, on whatever level that is, whether or not you want to be a professional photographer, whether you want to be a fine art photographer, whether you just want to shoot for yourself, that's fine too. We all want to improve when we're serious about this. And so don't let the attitude of the times get in the way of that. And that's why I wanted to talk about how to read a photograph and how to understand photographs, because if you can get into that in your own study, I think that that's where you're really going to start to see your work take off. I've talked about this for years, that it's really important. We all have this tendency to just get into just shooting pictures, and we don't really know what's come before us historically or what's going on right now. And it's important to go out and find these things. So anyway, I would love to hear from you guys, what you have to say. Drop me a comment below. Catch you on the next video. Until then, later.